Hey guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. In today's video, I'm going to run you through my full entire leg day. I originally had actually filmed this and mic'd the whole session up, but none of the audio was working, so you get my lovely voice voicing over instead. So to kick things off, we start off with the hack squat. Now, I absolutely love this hack squat. I've used it before at other gyms, but I personally find for some reason this in particular hack squat was just really fucking smooth. It just moved really, really well. Seems like the carriage was just like really well oiled. The ones I've used in the past have almost felt like they've needed a bit of oil or WD-40 to get working. And this one I really enjoyed. So having been the second week of this program, I am really trying to ease into this in terms of intensity. In the past couple of weeks, I have dealt with quite a little bit of nauseousness in my sessions. So I'm not trying to go too hard, too fast with this sort of program. I find that when you ease your way into the program and you pull back just a little bit, almost treat it like a little bit of a deload in those first 2 weeks, you just lay a really solid foundation to keep progressing long term and allows you to run that program a little bit longer. Now, that's not saying I'm not training hard. I still definitely am. So you'll notice here, I bumped this up from around 120 to 130 this week, still working nice and hard, just making sure that I'm keeping a few reps in the tank to still stimulate the muscles, but not absolutely annihilate myself. So when it comes to technique on this hack squat, my golden rules for this is obviously keeping a lower foot position. The lower your foot position, as long as your heels stay on the platform, which as you can see, mine are, you're going to get a lot of quads recruited here because if you're bending and getting a lot of deep stretch in that knee, you're going to be recruiting a lot of those quadriceps. That's just basic biomechanics. The other thing that I think is really underrated is actually pushing my hips or my lower back into the back pad. You'll notice that when I'm doing this, I am consciously trying to push my lower back into the pad. This just gives me something to push against and allows me to lower myself nice and slowly into the bottom position so I can explode out nice and strong and feel nice and solid throughout the whole movement. All right, so the next exercise we move on to is the Bulgarian split squat. Now, I want you to really notice how I've set this up. It's a little bit different to your traditional Bulgarian split squat. I'm using the Smith machine in front of me to hold on to something. Now, the reason for this is we're just creating a little bit more stability so I can just focus and put as much tension and effort into one leg at a time. And by creating a little bit more external stability, by what I mean by that is essentially holding on to something to stabilize myself, I actually give myself a greater ability to just focus on moving the load itself, and I get more emphasis on the quads. Whereas if I'm using two dumbbells or one without any external stability, there's a component of balance that I need to consider. And for the time being, that is not a variable that I want to consider. I just want to be able to load up my legs unilaterally or single leg so that I can get the most out of my quads and glutes here. Now, a takeaway you can take from this exercise as well is you'll notice that when I'm doing this, I actually do my right leg first. And there's a very good reason for that because I'm left footed. So you always, when doing any sort of single leg or single arm work, you always want to do your weaker side first. The reason for that is because when you go and do your stronger side last, if you are a little bit tired or a little bit fatigued, your stronger leg's probably going to be able to handle that a little bit better. Whereas if you're doing your stronger leg first and then you go into your weaker side, you might mismatch the amount of reps you could do, or it might be too heavy because you've already built up quite a bit of fatigue. And something else to consider as well is making sure you're taking some adequate rest in between legs. Yes, that also means that once you finish one leg, it'd be worth taking at least 90 seconds to around 2 minutes rest between each legs so you can get the most out of each unilateral exercise. All right, so then we move on to our seated leg curl. Now, this is an absolute staple when it comes to any of my leg days. The seated leg curl targets the hamstrings in that lengthened position, which is why it is so imperative that we have it in there. Now, one of the things you'll see that I'm doing here is I'm using a seat belt to lock myself into the bench or into the seat. This is just to make sure that my hips stay locked in. One of the most common things that people do when they're using a seated leg curl is they will almost like arch their lower back, which isn't the end of the world, but it's going to take some of that tension off the hamstrings. So using the seatbelt and then pushing myself in, which you'll see in a second, just allows me to keep my hips and my whole upper body locked in so I can target those hamstrings to the best of my ability and put all of that. Now, I have mentioned in the past that I do have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with this machine. Now, the reason for that is because you'll see like the green part of this machine. Now, not talking about like the little things that will move the seat back and forth and whatnot, but you'll see like this really big green circular thing. That's called the cam, and that's actually adjustable. Essentially, what it does is it allows you to change where the movement is going to be heaviest. I always adjust it to have it in its mid to lengthened range. So you'll see that anywhere in that top to mid range is where you want it to be at its heaviest, because that's where your muscles are close to the lengthened range, as well as they're going to be the strongest and the most leveraged in that position. Whereas if you make it in the shortened position right at the end where the heels are closest to me, then it's not really going to do much because your muscles aren't really strong in that position. So the reason it's a love-hate is because it actually makes it a lot harder and a lot more heavier in that lengthened position. So I feel my hamstrings a lot more. Now, something to keep in mind about this is that this is just like a nice to have thing. It's not essential. It's not a non-negotiable. It's just like if you have access to equipment like this, like myself, it's cool to have, but it's not going to make. Now we move to the leg extension. Now, I'm not going to lie, this is a pretty long workout, lots of exercises, and we still have one more after this. But it's just the phase we're in. We're building at the moment, so we have more volume to equate for more calories coming in. So if you are someone who's trying to build muscle, it does make sense to actually do a little bit more work inside the gym, because your body can actually handle the demands of higher volume training. If you are dieting, not so much. If you're someone like my girlfriend at the moment who is dieting and she's in a prep, she's not doing a lot of volume. She's obviously still spending quite a lot of time in the gym, but that's also because she's just tired as fuck and everything feels a lot heavier. So she's taking longer rest periods and her sessions still take quite a bit of time. So again, with this leg extension, I'm using the hustler pad, which again, these are all just nice to have things. I think something to really note is with this whole science-based lifting crowd and whatnot, there are definitely things to take on board and to consider into your training, but you don't need all of these extreme science-based machines, techniques, and stuff like that to build the most amount of muscle. The reality is training hard, eating properly, and just doing good exercises are going to allow you to make a lot of progress without diving too deep into the nuances of quote unquote science-based lifting. So to follow on from that, what I am doing here is that the same thing, I'm putting the cam or the resistance profile to be the heaviest in that mid to lengthened range, again, to leverage the bias of the lengthened part of the quads. And I'm also using that hustler pad where it just creates a little bit more range so my knees or my ankles are further back. And that again, just will put me in a more lengthened position. When it comes to the leg extension, the technique I always teach anyone that I coach and myself obviously is keep the toes up and think about trying to kick the wall in front of you. Now, when I say kick, I don't mean you actually kick up. You just want to think about trying to get your feet to the wall so you can fully extend, and toes are always up because you want to get the most activation out of those quads as well. Final exercise of this workout, we just have 2 sets here. This is supposed to be a hanging leg raise on a Roman chair. A Roman chair is just like the machine where you can do knee raises on, where you have your elbows locked in and your back supported. Now, my gym doesn't actually have that machine, so what I am doing is a variation of this, or an alternative. How I set this up is I have a bar around my lower back height and I put a bar pad there just for comfort, and then I have obviously my Versa grips so I'm not worried about my grip, and I hanging from a chin up bar. This allows me to still get a really good ab exercise in, where it's very similar to the hanging knee raises on the Roman chair, and it allows me to just reduce any swinging as well, which is why the bar is there. So it just reduces any sort of swinging, and I actually still get a lot of range of motion in this as well. And as you can see, like, my legs are pretty straight. It's still very similar. It's just a slightly different upper body position. So if you don't have access to any Roman chair to do hanging knee raises, I would highly recommend trying this out. It is a little bit of an effort to set up, and I can understand that, but it's definitely worth it. All right, guys, that is it for today's leg day breakdown. I really hope you guys got a lot of value out of today's video. Unfortunately, I couldn't mic up, or I tried to. It just didn't work out the way we wanted to. So hopefully this was still very informative and very valuable. I'll see you guys inside the next one.